Bring 'em out, hey. Bring 'em out, bring 'em out. Bring 'em out, hey. Bring 'em out, bring 'em out. VIP coming live from the VIP. Heard the nightlife, lost life.
Welcome to the 360 Sports Network NFL Draft Special, where we go through the entire first round, all 32 picks, with some of our expert selectors to see who your team might get, see maybe what trades could happen, but looking at where the picks are, what guys might go. We have with us tonight Alex Dellaverson, Greg Beshero, Dan Massaro from the Calf Muscle, and Matthew Henderson. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to jump right into it with the number one pick on the clock, the Kansas City Chiefs. Didn't have a great year last year, but we're all pretty much in unison with where the number one pick is going to go. And for a draft where there is so much parity, it's kind of interesting. Number one seems to be the one lock that we all agree with. Who are we going to go with there, Greg?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at Luke Joeckel, the offensive tackle out of Texas A&M. One of the reasons why I'm looking at this is they've got their quarterback. They need somebody to protect that quarterback and to protect pretty much anything offensive that they're going to do. So what better person to do that than Luke Joeckel out of Texas A&M?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's the one thing, you got to be able to protect the quarterback. They didn't do it very well last year. That's a good place to start, especially when there aren't very many, you know, guys out there that are, well, really talented positions coming out of the college game this year. So that makes perfect sense.
From what I understand, I mean, he's one of those once in 5 years, 7 years offensive tackle, a guy that, as John Gruden says, could block out the sun. You know, I think he's the safest pick, but then again, the Raiders thought Robert Gallery was the safest pick a few years ago. So, but I think he's a consensus with Andy Reid there, and you know, him spending a little bit of money on Alex Smith, which made me scratch my head, but still, you know, Joeckel was a safe pick, and I don't think the Chiefs are as far away as people think.
All right, let's move to number two, the Jacksonville Jaguars on the clock. Lots of possibilities here. Offensive tackle maybe, defensive end, but Dan, you're going to go with the home run right off the bat here, huh?
I am. I'm telling you. Do I think Geno Smith's going to be the pick? I'm saying yes, only 51% yes. I mean, I have a feeling, you know, the Jags might go outside back or, like you said, whatever, DN, whatever they might do. But the more you watch the NFL, you know, you score points to win. And Geno Smith, I think the Chiefs should take him. I know they signed Alex Smith, but, I mean, who knows? Geno Smith could be a home run. He could be a guy that fits into a system and does well. And I picked Geno Smith 99% based on what Blaine Gabbert's done and how Blaine Gabbert looks. I mean, he has to be, if you rank the 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, Gabbert has to be 32.
Yeah, and that's exactly why a lot of people are looking at Jacksonville to say, you know what, forget it, time to get the franchise guy now. I can't argue with that pick whatsoever. That is our consensus pick here at the number 2 spot for sure.
Again, I don't think that. I think the Jags have a long way to go. I think they're one of those teams that has, you know, they're a few pieces away, but who knows? If Geno Smith has a decent year, not even saying great. I mean, Justin Blackmon at the end of last year showed a lot. Cecil Short showed a ton. Mercedes Lewis is there, I believe, still. And, I mean, you never know. You never know. He could be a piece that turns that team into painful to watch to pretty enjoyable.
And let's not forget, they did send their entire front office, including the team president, to Geno Smith's pro day. So that's there is some serious interest there, so definitely a possibility. However, there is a more conservative pick out there. Henderson, tell me, who do you see as the more conservative pick here at the number 2 spot?
Well, the more conservative pick is Eric Fisher, the offensive tackle out of Central Michigan. He actually could get number 1 overall to the Chiefs. Most people see it as the Chiefs are going to take Luke Joeckel or Eric Fisher as number 1 overall. And consensus around the NFL community is that they are the top 2 prospects in this year's draft and the 2 safest picks. If you look at the passive offensive tackles taken to the top of the draft, Matt Khalil last year, Joe Thomas, Jake Long, who didn't quite work out as well as Miami hoped, but now he's on to St. Louis, just signed a nice big deal with them last year. The offensive tackles are a rather safe pick on the top, and the Jaguars still have Blaine Gabbert, who's young and progressing, and Chad Henne, who can be there as a safety valve. And they probably should go with Fisher with this pick to go opposite Eugene Monroe, have tackles at each position that are going to be able to protect the front side and the blind side of the quarterback. And if Gabbert doesn't work out this year, maybe just have a stopgap next year until Johnny Manziel or Teddy Bridgewater can come out and hopefully fill that void.
All right, the number 3 pick in the draft. We're looking at the Oakland Raiders, and the consensus pick here for 3SN is D. Milliner, the cornerback from Alabama.
I don't know what it is. D. Milliner is such an Al Davis pick, and if Al Davis were still with us and still in charge of that team, I have no doubt in my mind that that's what he would do. Obviously, playing in a division with Peyton Manning, and the receivers that Denver has now in Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, and Wes Welker, you're going to need to be able to cover the pass. And the Raiders have a little bit of skill offensively with Darren McFadden. Denarius Moore came on a lot last year, and the offense really could use some help too. But this draft is a little bit deeper in terms of the number of quarterbacks, because there's really nobody that's great at the top of that draft. They just picked up Matt Flynn, by the way. But D. Milliner is such a Raiders pick. That's the reason I have him going second. They obviously don't have Nnamdi Asomugha anymore. Pass defense out there is going to be critical, and that is an area I see them going.
Greg, there is another possibility out here. We have a couple picks. You and I both are going with a defensive tackle. Tell us about your pick there at number 3 for Oakland.
You know, I'm looking at Oakland, and I see Star Lutulele, the defensive tackle out of Utah, being, I think, a little bit better fit. Basically, Lutulele is an extremely versatile player who can play all over the defensive line in a three-man front. He's done it in Utah, and this is something that I can see him doing in Oakland as well. He just seems to be a better fit for the Oakland, for the Raiders.
All right, number 4, the Philadelphia Eagles. They have a lot of needs after a very disappointing dream team last year. We have Star Lutulele as the consensus pick here at this point. Peter King has reported that the Eagles really are in love with this guy from Utah. He's a raw player. The injury concern is apparently behind him, according to reports. So it sounds like he could come right in and be the nose tackle for Philadelphia. So that is a very good possibility. Greg, you're looking for them to go for a different kind of tackle here.
Yeah, I see Philadelphia going the way of getting an offensive tackle, and I see Lane Johnson out of Oklahoma as being their pick. Lane Johnson, extremely athletic, and he can be plugged in to protect the quarterback immediately. And this is somebody who can cover both the left side, who can cover the left side is to protect Vic and whoever else they have at quarterback. They need that left side presence there at the offensive tackle, and Lane Johnson is the man. And it's so important because you see how Baltimore protected the blind side there for Flacco, and of course you saw what happened there. Flacco has achieved some great things, and I think Philadelphia is going to go that same way by showing up the offensive line.
At the number 5 pick, the Detroit Lions on the clock. And they always could use some offensive line help. They're in a pass-happy offense. And who better to get than this solid left tackle? There have been comparisons that Eric Fisher could be the best left tackle in this draft, even better than Luke Joeckel, who is supposedly the number 1 overall pick. So if that's the case, and Eric Fisher is still around at pick number 5, very little doubt in any of our minds here that Detroit will take Eric Fisher right there. They could definitely use Eric Fisher if he drops to him, but seeing as he is not dropping, Dan, in your picks, where does Detroit need help the most?
Detroit was atrocious against the pass last year and the year before. They had a hard time getting the quarterback as well, but I'm going to go D. Milliner. I think D. Milliner, I watched him national championship, SEC championship. This guy's a cover corner. This guy, I really liked Morris Claiborne last year. I wanted the Browns to take Morris Claiborne in all honesty, but I think D is a little bit better than Morris Claiborne. And I know a lot of people are hyping up this shoulder surgery or whatever Milliner has, but you don't draft a guy for opening day of his rookie year. You know what I mean? You draft him for the next 10 years. So I think Detroit goes here and shores up, plugs a leak that they really need to plug.
It's a big, big leak in that Detroit secondary, and Milliner will be the long-term solution for sure if he goes there at number 5. A solid pick is that what that would be. All right, number 6, Dan Massaro's Cleveland Browns. Dan, where do they need the help?
Where do I start? They need the help everywhere on defense in terms of a pass rush and in terms of defending the pass. But the thing that I see, if Milner's there, I'd bet the house that they go Milner. But at the same time, Ray Horton came in as that defensive coordinator, and Ray Horton loves getting after the quarterback. They just signed Paul Kruger. That's all well and dandy. They're moving Jabal Sheard to an outside backer, and they're saying all the right things to give him a chance. But I think they really want to go out and get a guy that's going to wreak havoc on a quarterback. What I say, my opinion, is the outside backer is the new corner. And what that means is when you get to the quarterback, the receivers don't catch the ball. So I think even with this Paul Kruger addition and Jabal Sheard getting a shot on the outside, I think they go Deion Jordan from Oregon and hope that he gets to the quarterback as much as Ray Horton needs him to.
Well, yes, Dan, Deion Jordan obviously sounds like a good pick for Cleveland. Alex, you are looking for a different route. You think they're going to go defensive back, and I can't blame you on that. Tell us about D. Milliner here.
Well, Milliner, the thing with him, he's been heavily linked to the Browns, and most draft boards and most insiders are reporting that's their top prospect. And if Deion Jordan and Ezekiel Anza are off the board, it sounds like he'll be the pick. And, of course, if the Browns are desperate, they will trade down, but so is everyone else. The thing with Milliner is that he satisfies a big need. Sheldon Brown played well for Cleveland last year, but he's no longer on the roster. And the Browns don't have anyone to fill the void across from Joe Hayden. They brought in Brent Grimes for a visit, but he hasn't signed with them as of this writing, this morning. So if Cleveland can't secure Grimes or another top free agent corner, the front office will strongly consider Milliner. And like I said earlier, maybe Anza or Deion Jordan, but it sounds like the top prospect is Milliner.
All right, Dan. Number 7 on the clock. The Arizona Cardinals up to bat. And we see an offensive tackle is a pretty dire need, especially with Carson Palmer out there. You still have Larry Fitzgerald. Probably need to get the offensive tackle so Carson Palmer doesn't get his knee busted again.
Yeah, I love this. I have him taking Lane Johnson from Oklahoma, and I really like Lane Johnson based solely on the fact that this guy was a junior college quarterback. And he went to Oklahoma, and they said, okay, we have a quarterback. We're going to try you at tight end. And they had a tight end. They had another tight end. They had another tight end. They said, we're going to try you at left tackle. And next thing you know, this guy went from, in high school throwing the touchdowns and junior college throwing the touchdowns, and now he's going to sign a pretty hefty NFL contract protecting that quarterback. So I like Lane Johnson based on the position he used to play. He's an athlete, and being an athlete against these pass rushing schemes in the NFL is big. So the Lane Johnson pick to me, I think a tackle is a lock, like you said. I think a tackle is a lock for the Cardinals, and Lane Johnson is the best available.
Not to mention, you got to have smarts to be a quarterback. He's going to know what the quarterback is thinking before the quarterback himself may even be thinking it. So very wise pick probably there for Arizona, I'd say. That's some very good insight on Lane Johnson that not many people have heard about. Another possibility here for Arizona, they might not be able to get the good left tackle. Jokel, Johnson, and Fisher could all be gone. If so, they might look interior line. DJ Fluker would be another very solid possibility for them. Lots of options. I think that we were pretty much in agreement, though. Offensive line is going to be the key here for Arizona. All right, number 8, the Buffalo Bills on the clock. And again, another team that we can see going any direction. We see quarterback. We see wideout. We see offensive line. We see defense. We see free safety. We see linebacker. Offense or defense here, Dan? Where do they go?
I'm saying defense, and I love this pick. But the reason I'm not saying Matt Barkley is because I think if there's a lock, in my opinion, this isn't me reading into anything, it's in the second round the Bills take Ryan Nassib from Syracuse. So you can go with his old quarterback, or his old coach, Doug Marrone. So I have the Bills taking the quarterback in round 2, but I have the Bills taking Jarvis Jones in round 1, and I love this pick. A lot of people are turning away from Jones based on 40 times and bench press reps, but what they're failing to realize is how much he produced in the best conference in college football. So Jarvis Jones to go to Buffalo with that defensive line that underachieved last year, I think he's exactly what they need. If they can add his pass rush and his ability to cover as well with Mario Williams, Marcel Darius, Kyle Williams, I mean, that's a front seven that I have a hard time seeing disappoint again.
Absolutely. Now, here's the only question I have for you on that. What about this spinal stenosis stuff that is going on for Jarvis Jones? Is that going to turn off a team like Buffalo picking him that high?
I don't think that living in fear of a guy getting hurt is enough to, the risk is worth the reward. We'll put it that way, in my opinion. I think Jones is getting disrespectfully underrated right now.
Well, Tavon Austin's a good possibility. Jarvis Jones isn't a bad pick there either, Dan. You mentioned, though, Dan, about Ryan Nassib possibly going there in the second round. However, Matt, you have some interesting news. You think Ryan Nassib could go here at number 8?
Doug Marrone, the new coach of the Buffalo Bills, came from Syracuse, so he's obviously familiar with Nassib. He's familiar with his big frame and his strong arm. Buffalo, just like Joe Ryan Fitzpatrick, they got Kevin Kolb, but Kevin Kolb has shown within Arizona with one of the best wide receivers in the league, Larry Beshero, that he just couldn't cut it. He couldn't cut it skill-wise on the field, and he couldn't even stay on the field because he was always injury-prone. Marrone's familiar with Nassib. Nassib's familiar with Marrone. I'm sure Marrone's going to be bringing a lot of his offense there. It's something I see the Bills doing. It's something I've read about that they're seriously considering taking Nassib. But I'd be surprised if it actually happened in the number 8 spot. If the Bills do draft Ryan Nassib, look for them to trade down into the middle or the latter part of the first round to a team maybe like St. Louis, who has 2 first-round picks, is looking to move up and grab somebody like Tavon Austin right in front of the New York Jets that would want to get in position, and the Bills would get better value for Nassib later on.
Number 9, the New York Jets on the clock, and a lot of us seem to be going defense. Defensive line, especially now with the departure of Darrelle Revis, they need to shore up their defense one way or another. Do they go secondary here, or do they stick with the front 7?
I'm saying front 7. I'm saying a pass rush. People are big on Ziggy Ansah. Some people even have him go number 2 overall to the Jags. I think he falls, and I think the Jets scoop him up. The Jets have invested in their defensive line in the last couple of years. Quentin Coples, Muhammad Wilkerson. So I think Ziggy Ansah off the edge, if he pans out, I think that's big. I mean, he's an interesting player, though, James. I mean, he didn't even know what American football was until he was a sophomore in college. Think about that. And a lot of people compare him to Jason Pierre-Paul and how raw Pierre-Paul was. If Pierre-Paul was raw, this guy's even more so, considering he didn't even know the game 3 years ago.
Wow. And now he has the chance to be a top 10, maybe top 5 pick.
Yeah.
He's going to work with some of the best in the world at the position, and it's going to be a fun ride. Who knows what this guy could do. All right, Matt, you mentioned Tavon Austin possibly going at the number 8 spot if somebody trades up to get him. Why is Tavon Austin a good pick at number 9 for the New York Jets?
Well, because the New York Jets don't have much of an offense. Mark Sanchez needs as much help as he can get. Whoever their quarterbacks are need as much help as they can get. It's kind of sad in the offseason when you're looking at bringing in Jamarcus Russell for an offseason workout because you're having that much trouble with the quarterback position, even though Sanchez got that nice little extension last year. But to come in and pair him with Santonio Holmes in an offense that lost Sean Green, Bilal Powell looks like he's going to start there as the new starting running back this season. They need something to work on offense, and Austin would be able to bring that to them. That game last year where they played the Arizona Cardinals 7-6, it was one of the most brutally offensively challenged games probably in NFL history. They need to do something to wake their offense up and make the city excited again about New York Jets football.
And Tavon Austin is just the guy to do that, to say the least. Number 10, the Tennessee Titans on the clock. Another team probably going to go on defense, probably up front. Defensive line, you think, here?
Yeah, I do. I think Sharif Floyd. I think Star, Luke Salule is a little bit better than Floyd, and I'm going to stick with that. But a lot of people have Floyd valued in the top 3. So I think if he's still around, I think the Titans snatch him up. I think they could also go guard. I mean, people are so high on Chance Warmack and Jonathan Cooper, but at the same time, being that Floyd's valued so high, I think they jump on him and hope that his blend of athleticism and strength pan out to be, a franchise defensive lineman and help that pitiful run defense.
Well, if Tennessee doesn't go on the defensive line, which it seems like the popular pick, but it's not the only way they can go. Alex, what direction will they go instead? Could they go offensive line maybe?
Yeah, I think they have to go offensive line. They have to go offense in general. The front office and coaching staff will be fired if Locker and Chris Johnson don't perform well. They've invested a lot in those guys, and it's do or die time for the Tennessee Titans. General Manager Rustin Webster needs to do everything in his power to get the most out of this offense. Now, why Fluker instead of Jonathan Cooper or Chance Warmack? It's because Fluker can play right tackle as well. The current right tackle, David Stewart, probably won't be around after next year. Fluker can start a guard this upcoming season, and eventually he can move to the outside. The Titans are rumored to love Fluker, so we'll definitely consider him at number 10, and all signs seem to be pointing at him.
Okay, at the number 11 slot, they have lots of directions that they could go. A lot depends on what happens above them, but we have a consensus number 3 pick falling all the way to number 11 for you, Greg. Probably it's because a lot of teams above them aren't looking for a cornerback. Would that be a huge steal if Milliner were to drop all the way out of the top 10?
I think it would be a huge steal. One of the things here is the cornerback position is such a rich position right now. And there are so many limited positions out there, such as offensive tackle positions. It's not that deep. That's why I see the cornerback position dropping down to number 11, and I see D. Milliner going to San Diego. First off, the Chargers need to protect their quarterback. They haven't been able to do that consistently over the past years, and they need help in the secondary, in the worst way. But being that there's not a whole lot of talent to protect the quarterback, I see them filling their secondary position with D. Milliner as that person.
Again, a team that can go so many different directions, and this is why in the middle part of this draft, we do see lots of trades potentially happening. Probably won't, well, we can't obviously predict trades. There could be just 2. There could be up to 15 or 16. You never know. So assuming San Diego does stay in this pick, or offensive line maybe, or do they go on defense?
Offensive line. And again, emphasizing that we're assuming they stay at this pick, because I think there's anybody that's trying to trade, it's the Chargers to get a left tackle. But in this pick, I have them, instead of choosing one of the 2 guards who may be valued higher than this guy, I have him taking DJ Fluker, who played tackle at Alabama. And a lot of people have been big on Fluker since the end of the season because they say he's a mountain of a man, he's an athlete. My only thing is he played right tackle in college. And again, I didn't play in the SEC, nor am I the athlete or the specimen that DJ Fluker is, but I know that I played left tackle in college, and in a few formations I switched over to the right side, and it was hard to adjust and to get used to it. Your steps are totally different. I mean, it's all about technique. So I think they go DJ Fluker here, but I wonder if they put him on the left side and protect their quarterback's blind side, in this case Phillip Rivers, but I don't know how much longer Rivers has. Or do they leave him on the right and just hope that he's a all-pro right tackle?
At the number 12 spot, the Miami Dolphins, another team that could go multiple directions. We see offensive tackle, offensive guard.
Miami's interesting because they could go a lot of different ways with this pick. They could obviously look at receiver, Tavon Austin's still there, somebody like Cordero Patterson from Tennessee. Cornerbacks, they need for them. Right now I have them taking Desmond Trufant, but Xavier Rhodes would be another option. They could trade up, maybe if they want to try and grab D. Milliner if he's still there on the board. They could trade back, and they're also looking at offensive tackle possibilities, and that's the rumors they have with Kansas City looking to give up potentially a second-round pick for Brandon Albert. If they do that, then that's obviously going to take out tackle from this position. If they trade up, Lane Johnson would be a possibility. If they trade back, then you might look at guys like DJ Fluker, who's more of a right tackle and a run blocker, or the cornerbacks that I mentioned, Xavier Rhodes, and maybe even Jonathan Banks. But I think at number 12, I have them going with Desmond Trufant because Trufant's physical skills and his speed will be able to keep up with Tom Brady's offense in that division and the New York Jets with Santonio Holmes. But the Dolphins definitely have to shore up their secondary, especially after trading Vontae Davis at the beginning of last season to the Colts.
Okay, the number 13 pick, newly acquired pick for the New York Football Jets. They trade Darrelle Revis. They get back the first-round pick, along with some other draft stock from Tampa Bay. Greg, you and I see them filling an offensive line need at this point, Chance Warmack from Alabama seems like a logical selection here at number 13.
Yeah, Chance Warmack is a very flexible player. He's got good skills. This is a guy that's experienced with 40 career starts, including every game for the last 3 seasons. He's got a thick build from head to toe. He's flexible to bend. He's got a stout base. Basically, all the tools needed to protect somebody like Sanchez, who definitely needs protected in the worst way, or whoever else they have a quarterback up there. So yeah, I see them picking up a guard. Chance Warmack, I believe, is the best of the best out there for the guards.
There's a very good chance that they will go and get Chance Warmack. But if they don't get Chance, what's the chances of them looking in the secondary?
Well, the chances of looking in the secondary is good. LaRon Landry bolted after last season, so they have an opening at the safety spot. Kenny Beshero from Texas is the best safety prospect on the board. Could see them going that way, but also Chance Warmack, like you mentioned, Vladimir Dukosi hasn't really worked out for them at guard. And also outside linebacker, they would like a pass rusher out there. So Jarvis Jones, if they like his physical skills, even they may be scared by those injury concerns with him. And Bartavius Mingo is another name that they like, another player that might be coming off the board for them. But the Jets play in a division with now Mike Wallace, who you need to have safety help over the top, and obviously Tom Brady with the tight ends, Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, and they don't have Brandon Wood anymore. Whoever their deep threat will be, probably going to be addressed in this draft. Kenny Vaccaro would be a much-needed pick for the New York Jets secondary.
At the number 14 spot, Carolina Panthers on the clock. They could go a couple different directions. There's even the outside shot of maybe going wide receiver here. However, Alex, you and I both think that their biggest need is in the secondary. So that being said, what do you think they will do in this pick?
Well, I think they will go with secondary. And, yeah, they have looked at Sheldon Richardson. They have looked at Xavier Rhodes and Tavon Austin. But Kenny Vaccaro, safety from Texas, seems to be their guy. The safety position is an area of need for Carolina, and they have to address that. So right now, this is a tricky pick because they could go with any of those 3. But if they had to go one, if Kenny Vaccaro is available, and it sounds like he will be, or hopefully he will be, all signs point to the Texas Longhorn becoming a Carolina Panther. But this is one of those picks where it's not a strong pick for me. Just kind of if I had to choose one or the other, I'm getting an edge. So it's either going to be Sheldon Richardson, Xavier Rhodes, Austin, or Vaccaro. But just because the safety position is such in bad shape, I got to go Vaccaro in this one.
There is something very special about the guy Dan has picking at the number 14 spot. Tell us about this Sheldon Richardson.
Do you want to know something? Here's what I know about Sheldon Richardson. Sheldon Richardson is an athlete of all athletes at that 3-technique defensive tackle. But honestly, the reason I'm going with him here is, I follow mock drafts. And since I'd say October, I have not seen one mock draft with anybody else going to Carolina at 14 other than Sheldon Richardson. And I know they need a D tackle. The Cam Newton year, what was that, 2 years ago, they drafted a defensive tackle with their second and third pick. And both those defensive tackles fizzled out. So they need to do something to stop the run. And Richardson's an athlete, and he's strong. And Missouri puts out some good D linemen. Ask Alden Smith, ask Justin Smith. Missouri produces.
Number 15, the New Orleans Saints. One of the few almost consensus picks that we have throughout the rest of this draft. Bartavius Mingo, linebacker from LSU. He's just a solid player and somebody who would fit the New Orleans system pretty well. Am I right, Dan?
Yeah. New Orleans didn't get to the quarterback very well last year. And like I said earlier, I think, the quarterback sack is the new interception, if that makes sense. If you can stop the quarterback from throwing the ball, then that makes your DBs look like superstars. So I have him going Bartavius Mingo here from LSU. I'm not as high on Mingo as everybody else is. I like Sam Montgomery on the other side of the line, but the DN from LSU, I don't even have Montgomery going first round. But of what I've seen of Mingo, people just insist he's this freak athlete and this edge rusher. He reminds me a lot. I'm going to give you a cross sports reference from Mingo. The Detroit Pistons last year drafted a guy named Andre Drummond. He was a center from UConn, and when he was in college, he showed flashes. He didn't really live up to the hype, but he showed flashes. That's what Mingo reminds me of. When Mingo made a play, he made a play. But there were times that he just looked like a big, tall, raw athlete, but at times, you know, a little too skinny, maybe a little too anxious to get to the quarterback compared to play the run. So I'm anxious to watch Mingo in the pros. I'm really anxious.
How you like that, NBA fans? A little shout-out to you from Dan Massaro. Very good analysis there on Mingo, and hopefully we'll see the flashes become more prevalent and more frequent as he goes into the NFL. You know, they need somebody to protect your breeds, don't they, Greg?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I like DJ Fluker, the right tackle out of Alabama. You know, Zach Strief wasn't all that impressive in 2012, and that offensive line, it was like a sieve. Fluker is a powerful tackle. He's got underrated blocking skills, but with Sean Payton there, back in the helm again, and I see him fixing that position nicely, and that's where DJ Fluker fits that bill nicely from Alabama.
The 16th spot, halfway through the first round, the surprising St. Louis Rams. Looks like everybody pretty much is thinking wide receiver is the name of the game for St. Louis at this pick. Matt, who do you have them taking?
Well, just looking at that division now, the NFC West was one of the most ridiculed and made fun of divisions in football just a few years ago. Now, San Francisco's fresh off the NFC Championship and 3 yards away from being Super Bowl champions. The Seattle Seahawks came out of nowhere last year. Pete Carroll is one of the best coached GMs in the entire National Football League. And those two teams right now are the two favorites to represent the NFC in the NFC Championship next season. So you're looking at this and you see two high-powered dynamic offenses, both running that spread run option system. And the Rams, with Jeff Fisher now as their coach, losing Steven Jackson, have a lot of needs on offense to be able to keep up with the offensive output in a division of great defenses. The Rams defense stepped up last year and had a great season. You saw them take a chance on a guy like Janoris Jenkins early in the second round last year, and he paid out beautifully. He led all defensive players in touchdowns. So this year I think they're going to have to get Sam Bradford some help so their offense can keep up with the rest of that division. If Tavon Austin's there, great. I think that's the guy to go with to give them another slot receiver to replace Danny Amendola, and Austin would be able to use his speed all over the field. Don't be surprised if they trade up with one of their 2 first-round picks. Most likely the number 16 pick, but if not, look for them to draft another playmaker and a very raw, skilled wide receiver in Cordero Patterson from Tennessee, who only did play 1 year of Division I football. So he still has a lot to learn. He's definitely somebody that Jeff Fisher would bring in and give him to Sam Bradford to help out that offense.
All he takes is one more player maybe to make a difference, and this is kind of what they'll look for. That's why a lot of us look to them to get a playmaker. That's why we have Cordell Patterson going here. We see Tavon Austin possibly going here. Greg, you think that they're going to boost their way, though, in a little different way, not by the skill position, but by the intangible on the offensive line?
Yeah, I really see St. Louis building that offensive line. I mean, you take a look at their coach. You know, the new coach out there at St. Louis, Jeff Fisher, he's a power football type guy. And with that said, Jonathan Cooper, I think, fits the bill. This guy's an athletic guard, can get out on the move, can also stay on the line. This is somebody that St. Louis desperately needs to protect Sam Bradford and to provide a little bit of a spark for that offense.
Absolutely. Okay, number 17 on the clock. The Pittsburgh Steelers definitely are going to need some help on defense. The question is, do they go defensive line, do they go linebacker, or do they go secondary? Matt, which spot do they go?
Interesting. Pittsburgh is linebacker capital of the NFL. You think them at Baltimore and you think of great linebackers in this league, at least over the past decade. Pittsburgh obviously losing James Harrison. Lamar Woodley has had trouble staying on the field in recent years. Jarvis Jones looks like a great pick in this situation. But one position of need that the Steelers really need to address is defensive tackle, running that 3-4. Sheldon Richardson's a guy who can come in and really help that defensive line. Cameron Hayward and Ziggy Hood haven't really panned out like they'd hoped, so that might have Pittsburgh shy away from this right here. But the lack of a defensive tackle in that system right now really has to concern them. And with such a nice draft of defensive tackles here in this first round, you have Jonathan Hankins out of Ohio State, Sheldon Richardson out of Missouri, Starlook to Laley out of Utah, and Sharif Floyd up at the top. Richardson, if he's sitting here, looks like a nice pick for Pittsburgh to fill that middle.
Well, Pittsburgh also definitely will need to start revamping that linebacker core because, well, they've lost over the years. That's how they've done it. They've lost James Harrison. They lose big names, but they just rebuild in the draft. And that's kind of the way I'm looking. I think that they'll go with a linebacker like Jarvis Jones. Do you agree with that assumption there, Alex, that they'll go linebacker here?
Oh, I definitely agree. I think they're going to go with Jarvis Jones from Georgia. And this would be a great pick for them. See, Jarvis Jones was predicted to go in the top 5 in a lot of mock drafts just as early as January. And he's sliding because of his spinal issues, and his poor 40 time doesn't really help either. But the thing is, the Steelers will take a chance on him. And I don't want to say a chance. They really want this guy. And I was kind of struggling with the idea that maybe they should go with the receiver because of the loss of Mike Wallace. But the Steelers draft smart. They know just because a lot of teams are kind of shying away from Jarvis Jones because they think he has some red flags there, things like that, a spinal issue. The Steelers will take the best player on the board. So I don't think they're going to go for a wide receiver just yet, but especially since James Harrison is gone, I see no reason why they don't take the outside linebacker, defensive end from Georgia here. So I can't see any scenario, if Jarvis Jones is available, why they would go outside of him. So to me, Jarvis Jones is a lock to be a Pittsburgh Steeler next year.
Look at number 18. The Dallas Cowboys, you know they need some help on the offensive line. They always do because Tony Romo is always looking up at that big, beautiful Jerry Jones ceiling. So I think Matt is going to be going with an offensive lineman here at pick 18. Am I correct?
I do believe so. I'd honestly be surprised if Jonathan Cooper was still on the board. I think there are a lot of teams that would like to trade up to get what many consider to actually be the best guard on the board. But Chance Warmack, obviously, with that great national championship performance and that great Alabama run offense, is currently going in those mock drafts over him. But Jonathan Cooper is being rated by scouts and analysts out there as one of the best guard prospects on the board to help out Felix Jones and DeMarco Murray, and also Tony Romo to keep him upright with that new extension he just signed. Jonathan Cooper would be a good pick to bring him in and put him right in the middle of that line with the Cowboys.
Tony Romo's always on his back, so offensive line would definitely make sense. They got burned in the secondary a lot, so cornerback or safety could make sense. What direction will they go, Greg?
I see them picking a safety. I see Matt Elam coming out of Florida. This is an extremely aggressive safety, very fast, and plug and play in the NFL anywhere. Matt Elam was probably one of the best of the bunch there in the safeties coming out in this draft.
At number 19, the New York Football Giants. They have, it's kind of a surprising year because they didn't have the greatest year, it felt like, but still they won some games. But it seems like they have a good number of holes that they could fill. They could definitely use some help on defense. I think that's the best way to go. Don't you agree?
I agree. I see the Giants falling in love with Tank Carradine, the defensive end out of Florida State. This is a guy who, if he hadn't torn his ACL back in November, would have been probably one of the top 5 or top 6 off the board. But I see him falling down to number 19. I see him fitting into the Giants' mold quite nicely.
Chicago
is on the clock with the number 20 overall pick. And they're a team, you need a linebacker more than likely to try to replace Brian Urlacher. The consensus pick is Bjorn Werner, just because best available strategy going on. He could be as high as a 6 or 7 pick in this draft without much question. We have him as high as 6 to Cleveland in a couple of our mocks here. So him being available at this point could be a very good possibility for Chicago. However, it seems like the consensus amongst others and amongst people worldwide is that they will get a Golden Domer of some type. Greg, who do they get? Are they going to replace Brian Urlacher with their first-round pick?
I think they will. I don't think, first off, for any loyal Bears fans out there, anybody can replace Brian Urlacher, but they need to find somebody that has proven run-stopping skills. And you got Manti Te'o out there, the linebacker from Notre Dame. This guy's been talked about for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately, but he is a proven run stopper. The guy definitely has some good skills, and plus he's going to be playing somewhat close to his base of Notre Dame if he goes to Chicago.
You see them taking a bit of a different route here, Dan. I kind of like your pick here at number 20.
If they went linebacker, if they went Alec Ogletree, Manti Te'o, I wouldn't be surprised, but I have him taking Tyler Eifert, tight end from Notre Dame. He's a guy that, from what I watched, he went up and got the ball when it was in the air. And I know the Bears just recently signed Martellus Bennett, but, the evolution of the NFL, the two tight end system is just flourishing. And this guy, I like Zach Ertz from Stanford, but I feel like Eifert's just a much safer pick. To me, he's a combo tight end, if that makes sense. He's a guy who's going to go in traffic, catch a ball, and fall down. He's a possession guy, but at the same time, he can run up the seam and be the linebacker for a 50-yard touchdown. So I have him going Eifert.
Chicago has a lot of Notre Dame fans. I think they'd be quite happy with that pick. Whether they go Manti Te'o or Tyler Eifert at this pick, getting a Domer would be quite nice for Chicago at number 20. All right, the Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock, and they could go a lot of different directions. They could go maybe a defensive line. They could go secondary, maybe even a possible running back here. Tell me, Matt, where do you think they go with this pick?
Well, yeah, that's interesting because they have needs at the running back. Obviously, the running back that comes to mind is Eddie Lacy. But in a draft of not too many strong running backs, you'd think that they would be able to trade back and still get value out of the running back position as long as acquire some more picks in the draft. But I think the Bengals ultimately get a safety here. They had Brandon Merriweather on their team last year, and he's obviously up there in age, getting cut from New England a couple years ago. Someone that is on the downside of his career. They need to get some youth in there to go along with Leon Hall, who's one of the best cover corners in the NFL. They just got some help by Mike Wallace bolting and leaving the division. And what one really has to worry about in the division now is what Baltimore did to get through to the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco, throwing up those bombs to Jacoby Jones and Torrey Smith, letting them run under them. So you need to have that safety help up there. And Eric Reed out of LSU is a player that will be able to come in and stabilize their secondary a little bit. And if you don't look at Eric Reed in this situation, Matt Elam out of Florida is another one that might be on the board at this point to look at for safety help in Cincinnati.
Yeah, safety is definitely a thing that could definitely be done. I'm going to lean toward Eddie Lacy here just because I like the way Eddie Lacy would look in a Bengals uniform. I just think he seems to be the perfect fit with that system. It just feels like that more power back in Cincinnati is something that they could very much use at this point. So I really like that pick. I like Reed there too. There's lots of options, and that's what makes this draft very interesting, top to bottom. All right, Dan finally gets to talk about his favorite player in this draft with St. Louis at the number 22 spot. Tell us about your man, Eddie Lacy.
All right, I have Eddie Lacy going here to the Rams. I love Eddie Lacy. I'm a Browns guy. Trent Richardson's a Brown. I'm a Trent Richardson believer. But I think Eddie Lacy is going to be even better in the pros because Eddie Lacy, Trent Richardson, when he has the ball in his hands, he runs hard, he runs mean. Eddie Lacy, when he approaches the line of scrimmage, runs mean. So, again, if the Rams can make out of this with Tavon Austin and Eddie Lacy to play on turf with a quarterback who needs to make a leap this year, I think Sam Bradford's going to be hungry because, he's been average at best. And, a newly revamped offensive line with the addition of Jake Long. I really like Lacy here, and I really like Lacy to if I could give an early favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go Eddie Lacy.
If Eddie Lacy survives and Eddie Lacy goes to St. Louis, that would be an absolute great combination with a wide receiver pick earlier for them. We are looking at a couple different options, though, here, and Matt thinks they're going with a different offensive spot for back-to-back offensive picks here in the first round. Not running back, though. Who do you have them taking?
Yeah, sure, Eddie Lacy would be a great pick here. And Jeff Fisher, being the coach that he is, loves the ground and pound game, and Eddie Lacy would be a perfect back for that system. But I honestly see Sam Bradford getting more help in the passing game. Don't have a very strong tight end game there in St. Louis with Lance Kendricks as their main option. So Tyler Eifert on the board being here. Tyler Eifert or Zach Ertz. I have him going Tyler Eifert, going to St. Louis with the 22nd pick. So I think they're giving Sam Bradford more help in the passing game here to try and beat those defenses vertically and in between the seams of San Francisco and Seattle, because that's going to be one important thing to be able to do in that division, now that it is probably the best division in football.
Wow, if St. Louis were to keep both of their picks here in the first round, it looks like they'll go two offensive guys. So you're looking either Cordarrelle Patterson or Tavon Austin first, and then you're getting Tyler Eifert or Eddie Lacy second. Man, the greatest show on turf may very well be back.
If they don't go with either of those, my guess is that they go defensive line, defensive tackle, address that position.
All right, Henderson's Minnesota Vikings are on the clock, and I think that he is maybe a little concerned about who he has going at this spot in the draft. Tell us who you have Minnesota taking at the number 23 spot, provided they don't trade out with one of these two picks.
Well, I have Minnesota going with Manti Te'o. Minnesota's only defensive line, inside linebacker on the team right now on the regular roster was their third string last year, except for a couple guys they signed up the practice squad at the end of the year. So Manti Te'o obviously showed last year on big stages that he can make big plays against big teams. Didn't happen in the national championship game. Maybe it was the hoax that was on his mind. Maybe it was just he got completely manhandled by Alabama's offensive line, which the tape does show. But there's no secret that he has great football instinct and can play. A lot of people were scared by his 40 time and that national championship game. But Minnesota really needs somebody in the middle. They could go Manti Te'o here or Kevin Minter. I read some rumblings today from the beat writer of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune that they don't plan on trading up in the draft, but they do plan on trading back. That would probably happen with their 25th pick instead of their 23rd pick, because you always have to be worried the Packers back there at 26 who would jump up and steal somebody just because of that in-division rivalry. But Minnesota's first pick at Manti Te'o is there. I find it very hard to believe they're going to pass up somebody like that, especially with Rick Spielman being the Notre Dame guy that he loves. Kyle Rudolph, John Sullivan, Harrison Smith, and Robert Blanton last year. They have a lot of Notre Dame ties on that team, and it's looking like another Fighting Irish could be in the purple and gold next season.
Absolutely, and we have Manti Te'o going. Alex and Dan have them taking Manti Te'o at the number 25 spot, so certainly a popular pick amongst us prognosticators. I look at Robert Woods here as a good possibility as well. There are some big rumblings, it sounds like, that Robert Woods could be in purple and gold as well. They just seem to really like the guy, and, you know, who's to blame him? He's put up big numbers at USC, even with guys like Marquise Lee going and taking numbers away from him. I think Robert Woods is being undervalued at this point. Minnesota could use a strong wide receiver to complement what Greg Jennings is going to be out there and to help replace what they lose with Percy Harvin.
Yeah, definitely. They could use a receiver. Stillman has had a couple of interviews with Robert Woods. They like him as a player. And, you know, at the end of the first round value, you have teams behind them, such as Houston and New England, that might be looking at a wide receiver like Robert Woods. So if they wanted to take him, the place right now would be this 23rd or 25th pick to snatch him up.
Well, Alex, you have Manti Te'o going to Minnesota a couple picks later at pick number 25 instead of 23. But tell us why you like Te'o going to the Vikings.
Well, a lot of teams are kind of shying away from Te'o, and because he's kind of like a Tebow distraction in a way. And what I mean by that is because of the media frenzy that's going to be around him, and I don't need no one needs to remind anybody what happened this winter, so I'm going to spare everyone that. But the thing is, another reason why Notre Dame is heavily looking at him is that there's a lot of Fighting Irish players on the Vikings roster. So as far as fitting in, the Vikings front office believes if they can get Te'o in there shouldn't be any problems. He should be fine providing leadership. And I know his 40 time wasn't the greatest at the combine. He ran a 4.8, I believe. And later he blamed it on his fatigue. He also looked stiff at his drills. But Tebow did handle himself well in front of the media. He seems to be more mature, more composed, and he's just a very good football player. He really is. The team doesn't want to deal with the media circus, but to me, I think just the fact that there are so many Notre Dame fighting Irish players on that team, it makes me believe that they have faith in Manti Te'o. So if the Vikings don't pick him here, I could see Te'o dropping a lot, possibly into the later rounds.
And you made a funny comment there when you compared him to Tim Tebow. It's a very, very good comparison in terms of distraction. And even so much of a comparison that you can make between these two, you actually made a Freudian slip and called Te'o by Tebow's name. So just goes to show you how similar their stories are right now.
See, that's the whole point. But the Vikings, I think they're going to do it here. So I hope so. I'm rooting for the guy. He's been through a lot.
Indianapolis Colts at number 24 on the clock. And at this point, Jarvis Jones, if he's still on the board, is definitely going to be picked. We're all pretty much thinking that way, that there's no way he'll flip much further than that. So that is the 3SN consensus pick. However, there's another Jones out there that could possibly be taken by the Colts at this point. Who is that Jones there, Alex?
Dotson Jones from UCLA. The Colts signed Ricky Jean-Francis to a large deal this offseason, but they are still looking to upgrade their defensive line, and they really don't have that consistent of a pass rusher. Corey Redding is there, but he's going to be old soon. He's going to be 33. He's also due $7 million over the next 2 seasons. Dotson Jones is one of the best prospects available for the Colts if he falls that far, and everyone's expecting him to be there. So, and not too much to say about this pick. I just think it makes too much sense for him not to be an Indianapolis Colts.
Minnesota back on the clock, and seeing as they've gotten defense with a linebacker, I don't know. Do they go defense again at number 25 if they keep both picks, or do they have other needs they need to fill here, Matt?
I kind of think they go defense again. Wide receiver is a position where you can find a lot of gems late in the draft. Look at Marcus Colston, one of the best receivers in the league with a 7th-round pick. And this one has a lot of them that you might find in that 2nd to 3rd-round range, where you're going to find a wide receiver and get great value out of them and get a good amount of years. So that's why I think Minnesota does address their defense again. Obviously, they cut Antoine Winfield. He was one of the cap casualties this year, and he signed Seattle on a 1-year deal. So Xavier Rhodes, if he's still on the board at this point, I think is too good to pass up for the Vikings. That's another person I think the Dolphins could take early in the 1st round. If you don't see Xavier Rhodes on the board at this point, maybe look at guys like Desmond Trufant or DJ Hayden, cornerbacks that are quickly rising up draft boards. So I think Minnesota tries to shore up their secondary. Chris Cook had an up-and-down season last year, and he's always been in and out of the news with off-field incidents. Harrison Smith really shored up that secondary. So don't be surprised to look at them again by trying to pick up another mark for the secondary. The one thing Rick Spielman loves to do is wheel and deal on draft day. So with the Vikings having 2 first-round picks, don't be surprised if they try and use those as leverage to move back just a little bit, stockpile a little bit more towards the middle of the draft, and try and get more value because they do have a lot of needs on the defensive line and the secondary, obviously on offense at wide receiver, and they might even be looking for a little bit on the offensive line too at the guard position. The only thing that's for sure is I think running back's pretty safe in Minnesota.
Very true on that. I don't think anybody is going to be passing up Adrian Peterson anytime soon. All right, number 26, the Green Bay Packers.
Who needs crackers when you have cheese and Packers? Who needs crackers when you have cheese and Packers?
And if there's one thing that you have to know in playing in that division, when you're playing teams like the Detroit Lions twice a year, you got to be able to stop the pass. So are they going to shore up that secondary a bit here, Dan?
That's what I think. I mean, the Packers, they're a team that can go a lot of ways, just like the Colts, but to a more of a degree. You know, they don't really have glaring needs. But I see Chuck Woodson, no longer being there. I think they go safety. I thought about Monty Ball, but again, how important is a running back? And I have him going, dropping a Woodson and picking up an Elam. I have him taking the safety from Florida. And I think he's sort of a strong safety, free safety hybrid. So I think he's a nice little fit here and can do a lot of things.
And Green Bay likes to do a lot of things with their defensive back, so that seems to fit right into their scheme. Sounds like a good fit. Another good fit might be wide receiver with the Houston Texans. 4 out of the 5 of us are going wide receiver, and the consensus pick is Dan?
Yeah, I think that I think the Texans take Robert Woods here. Woods is a guy who, again, if you looked at mock drafts at the end of, last summer, if you looked at mock drafts up until halfway through this college football season, a lot of people had Robert Woods as the first receiver off the board. I think the Texans go Woods. I think Woods is made for that. Again, to see a receiver who runs good routes play indoors, it's a beautiful thing. I think the sky's the limit. And I think had it not been for Marquise Lee's unbelievable year this year, if Woods gets a few more balls thrown his way, again, he could be a top 10 guy, first receiver off the board. I haven't gone Woods. I think a receiver to the Texans is a lock of all locks.
I have the Houston Texans taking Justin Hunter, wide receiver from Tennessee. The Texans have needed a number 2 wide receiver for years, and now that Andre Johnson is getting into his 30s, it won't be long until they have to lock up another wide receiver. And Matt Schaub needs as much help as he could get. So to me, Justin Hunter, he's big body, a lot of athleticism. I think he'd be a great fit for the Houston Texans.
Oh, and I know that our good friend Greg has made comparisons between Justin Hunter and your favorite player of all time, Randy Moss. So I know you got to be happy about that if Houston were to get this guy.
Yeah, they'll like this guy. I could also see him go to the Patriots if they drop long enough. They haven't had a deep threat in a while, so if he doesn't go to the Texans, look for the Patriots to possibly snag him up.
A little foreshadowing for you there. I like it. Yes, wide receiver seems to be the consensus, whether it's Hunter, whether it's Robert Woods, Keenan Allen. Wide receiver seems to be what Houston would likely get. If they don't go wide receiver, or if they decide to trade back a little bit, or teams are trading up to steal some of these guys away, look for them to get Sly Williams. Just a good, solid defensive tackle that can eat up that front seven. And if he eats up room in the middle, that allows J.J. Watt to be more effective on the outside. So it just seems like a natural progression for that Houston defense to take the next step forward in terms of trying to make that next step, which would be a championship game and a Super Bowl run. Number 28, the Denver Broncos are on the clock now. And now that they've gotten Wes Welker, I think their offense is pretty much solidified. They'll need to look in the draft to get some defensive help. The question is, which direction do they go? Defensive backs or maybe some guys along the line or at linebacker? Let's start with Greg. Who are we taking here?
Actually, I see Denver picking up Desmond Trufant, the cornerback out of Washington. Very talented guy. For many years, Denver spent trying to find a good cornerback to pair up with Champ Bailey. Trufant fits this bill. He's well-rounded as a cornerback. He's got great speed, and he's got a strong family pedigree. And that, I think, means a lot to a team like the Broncos. So, with that said, I see Desmond Trufant going to the Denver Broncos, cornerback.
After getting absolutely annihilated by the Ravens in the playoffs, they need some help on defense. The question is, front seven or defensive backs?
I go front seven, and I like Bjorn Warner a lot from Florida State. I think that him falling, I'm a Bjorn Warner and a DeMontre Moore guy from A&M. I think Warner's a better fit here. He's a true defensive end. And I just look at this whole front seven thing as the rich getting richer. Last year they picked Derek Wolfe. I think Derek Wolfe is a monster. And funny story, a friend of mine that from college, his friend played football at Cincinnati and roomed with Derek Wolfe his freshman year. And he called his friend and said, listen, my roommate's the biggest guy I ever seen, and all he wants to do is hunt and chew tobacco. So Derek Wolfe, I've known about him for 5 years. I've followed him, and he's a run stopper. So to pair him up with Bjorn Warner, who is a DN that stops the run and the pass, I think that'd be big.
All right, number 29, New England Patriots. They just went and got Danny Amendola to replace Wes Welker, but they're going to get another wide receiver, Dan?
They're such a wild card. I threw a receiver down here because, Gronk has the infection, and they don't know if he'll be back. Amendola is good, but he's he's a slot guy. Justin Hunter's another one, like Cordero Patterson, his college teammate. They're raw. So I think that this is something Belichick would like to work on. I mean, I picked Hunter over Keenan Allen based on the ceiling, not the floor. I think Keenan Allen has a higher floor. I think he's going to catch you 50 balls a year, while Hunter could bust like Chad Jackson did for the Patriots. But I think Hunter's ceiling's pretty high. I think to work him with Brady would be big, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the reason why I have New England picking Bleedy Ray Wilson out of Connecticut is because Belichick has really expressed a tremendous interest in this player. This guy's a quarterback out of Connecticut. Belichick really likes this guy, and I think when Belichick likes somebody, he feels that they can fit that mold. That's why I think Wilson's going to be the better fit there for New England at the cornerback position.
So if they had both Trufant and Ray Wilson there as potential picks, they're both on the board at that point, you think that they would go with the guy out of UConn instead of Trufant from Washington?
I just had that feeling.
All right, number 30. Oh, Tyler Eifert is the consensus pick here. If Tyler Eifert is off the board, though, where do they go? Do they look at another position? Or, Matt, maybe do they take the number 2 tight end on the board here?
I think they go with the number 2 tight end on the board. They had to really talk Tony Gonzalez into not retiring, and I feel like that means he only has 1 year left. So why not draft a guy like Zach Ertz to come in, be that third target for Matt Ryan, because they don't use the slot too much. It's really a tight end. And obviously with the big 2, Roddy White and Julio Jones, being the star wide receivers down as they are in the great season that they put up last year. But they're going to need that third passing option, and after Tony Gonzalez leaves, who's that going to be? You have a chance to grab a guy like Zach Ertz, who played for a couple of years under Andrew Luck at Stanford and then had a nice season last year, even without a real great quarterback there again. Ertz would be a perfect fit for their system, coming in as a blocker, blocking for who will be Jacquizz Rodgers, now the starting running back down there. And Steven Jackson's there, I believe, correct?
Yes, he is there now.
So Ertz would be a perfect person for that system. That they did that 2 tight end system in Stanford for a couple of years. So bringing a guy like this, gel him, form him, let him sit behind Teddy Gonzalez for a little bit and play in what can be a little bit of a new offense down there in Atlanta if they have those 2 tight ends for 1 year.
I have Desmond Trufant going to the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are hurting in 2 areas, defensive end and quarterback. The latter's a huge issue with Dante Robinson and Brett Grimes both gone, and Desmond Trufant would be a great addition to the team. So, to me, I think it's a great fit, and I see no reason why the Falcons won't give him a shot if he's available by then, and he should be.
At pick number 31, San Francisco 49ers, the Super Bowl runner-ups on the clock. And if there's one thing that's for certain, they did not do very well stopping Joe Flacco in that passing game. So it would only make sense that they would go and, beef up that secondary pick. And that's why the consensus pick for 3SN is John Cyprien. So tell us why the 49ers will take Cyprien here.
Well, they could use him. See, despite making the Pro Bowl, Whitner wasn't really that good last year. He actually surrendered more touchdowns than any other safety in the NFL. Deshaun Goldson, meanwhile, left for the Buccaneers in free agency. And, the 49ers, they really need to upgrade that secondary, especially after Joe Flacco, of all people, torched them in the Super Bowl. So I think Cyprien would make a great addition to the team. There's a lot of buzz about him, and there are multiple reports indicating that several teams have ranked him as high as the number 2 safety in their draft class. I mean, I could see him go to the Bengals, actually, but I think he's going to fall to the Niners. So the Niners are desperate. They are absolutely desperate for help in the secondary, and we all seen that in the Super Bowl. So to me, I think they're going to take the safety out of Florida International.
Safety with John Cyprien is the main is our pick, the consensus pick. Dan, you see him going front 7 instead, though. Yeah,
I have them. I thought safety. I really did. I chewed on it, but I think with the best 3 safeties off the board, I think, and I'm hearing a lot about the Niners interested. They have all these draft picks. They have number 31 and number 34, I believe. A lot of people are insisting that they're looking to trade up to get a really good defensive tackle. I mentioned earlier that Jonathan Hankins was a lock, a month ago to be a top 15 pick. Jonathan Hankins is still there. I don't really know if he's a true nose guard, but I know he's big enough. He's about 325. So I have him going Hankins here and, making that defensive line that's already strong even stronger. And I mean that literally. I mean, their defensive line is a bunch of bulls. And Hankins is a strong guy, so I have the Niners taking Hankins.
And good way to stop the passes. Don't let him throw it to begin with. So, like you said, Hankins, if he falls this far, that's an absolute steal for the 49ers. And I like what you said there with the trades because they're definitely a team that can trade up when you have that many picks, especially early second round, get rid of one, trade up, especially when a team like Buffalo might go after Ryan Nassib. And finally, wrapping it up, the 32nd pick, the last pick of the first round, the Baltimore Ravens. They lost Ed Reed, they lost Ray Lewis, they traded away Anquan Bolden. And that's where we're all looking for them to fill in a need. And they have 3 big positions that they could fill it in, and that's where we're going to have them go with their draft pick here in one of those 3 positions. So what's it going to be? Is it going to be the safety, or is it going to be the linebacker, or is it going to be wide receiver? Greg, what's your thought?
You know what? With much of the talent already off the board at this time frame, I see them going to a safety at this time frame, and I see Eric Reed fitting the Baltimore mold nicely. Reed's a strong all-around athlete. He had 14 pass breakups in his last 2 seasons at LSU. I see him fitting that need nicely in Baltimore. So Eric Reed, safety out of LSU.
I'll tell you this, before I say my pick, if Joe Flacco can get this team 9 wins, based on the loss of everybody they lost, then he's worth that money. I'm still up in the air about Flacco. I was so anti-Flacco. Up until this year in the playoffs, I realized this guy has told people to shut up and sit down in the playoffs every year he's been in the NFL. So if Flacco can get this team 9 wins with all these losses, I'll be impressed. But I have him going Alec Ogletree. I think Ogletree's a heck of a player. I mean, he's had some legal issues, and he could fall out of the first round. But I have him going Ogletree. They lost Lewis. They lost Ellerby. They need to go with a middle linebacker. So Ogletree is my pick here.
Yeah, good point there on the legal issues. That's not a big concern for Baltimore. I also have them going with Ogletree here, Dan, and a big thing was because even though they have legal issues, I mean, you look at who Baltimore's picked last couple of years, including guys like Jimmy Smith, they're not worried about those legal issues. They come and they can take care of business and get those players on the right side of things. So I think that is a solid pick because they shouldn't be worrying about legal issues. They never do.
Right.
All right. Before I let you go, Dan, I need to ask you, what is going to be the biggest storyline of this first round of the NFL draft and in the draft as a whole? What do you think the big storyline will be?
I'd say there's 2. I think they're both obvious. But first and foremost, this is a year that isn't real big on the quarterbacks. So I'm anxious to see in that top 50 picks. I think quite a few quarterbacks will go in that top 50. E.J. Manuel, Barkley, Geno Smith, Nassib, whatever you want to do. I'm anxious to see where those guys go. I'm anxious to see if we see a first round in which no quarterbacks go. I think Geno Smith's a lock, but you never know. And the other thing, obviously, Manti Te'o. I mean, I don't know if I'm mistaken, but I think he turned down an invite to New York for the draft. But I'm anxious to see where he goes, and I'm really anxious to watch him throughout his career because he's a guy who he performed, he produced. I was never huge on him, but with this situation, my heart breaks for the guy, and I really hope he bounces back from that. I really do. I hope he has a career where he's, in the Pro Bowl. I hope he wins a Super Bowl, and I hope that he makes all this stuff right. But those are my storylines.
Well, it all starts for him and for the 31 others here. It starts on Thursday night. Well, thank you, Dan, very much for joining us for this 2013 edition of the NFL mock draft edition, and hopefully you'll be back with us again next year to keep dissecting these drafts. You give great insight, and we love every minute with it.
Absolutely. A lot of fun, James. Go Browns.
Matt, what is going to be the big storyline as we come through here this prime time on Thursday night?
I think the big storyline is going to be Ryan Nassib being a first quarterback pick. You look at last year, Matt Barkley stayed in school because he wanted to lead his team to a national championship, and then everybody thought he would be a Heisman frontrunner and a consensus number 1 overall pick. If he were in the draft last year, he wouldn't have fallen past number 8 with Miami. But you figure somebody probably would have traded up in front of that, so he probably goes somewhere in the top 6, 7 picks. Now he's falling off the board, might not even be in the first round. You have quarterbacks like Geno Smith, who, when West Virginia started 5 or 6-0, everybody was talking about him being a great quarterback prospect out of this draft. He's quickly falling on draft boards, and if he gets past the Jaguars at number 2, the Eagles at number 4, and the Bills at number 8, which is very, very likely to happen, and he's somebody that might be taken in the low part of the draft in the early to late 20s. And everybody all the time keep pointing to the Bills taking Ryan Nassib, a guy who just completely came out of nowhere. It obviously helps having a college coach being in the NFL at this point, and also the same area, Syracuse, Buffalo, just hours away. So I think the story on the first day of the draft is Ryan Nassib being the first quarterback picked. All in all, I believe there eventually will be 4 quarterbacks picked in the first round, trades and all. But the fact that Nassib will be first will be very shocking to some people.
Let me ask you real quick, Matt. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Put it this way: if you were a coach, you were in the college game, you go to the pros, would you be more likely to go and pick your own college player because you know what he can do, or would you be less likely to because then if the guy doesn't succeed in the pros, then it's looked bad upon yourself that, oh, he only got picked because I coached him before? How do you feel that? How do you get that balance?
I'd probably, if the guy were the best player available, I would definitely take him. This is really tricky with quarterbacks because Buffalo's obviously an area that hasn't had a great quarterback since Jim Kelly. They've gone through numbers and numbers of guys up in that area. So I think this is a position where it puts Doug Marrone on the line a little bit more, his position on the line immediately, because he's going and taking a guy maybe at number 8 overall that is not among the 30 best players in the draft this year. So to look at that, like for instance, in my mock draft, I also have Deion Jordan from Oregon going to play for Chip Kelly in Philadelphia. I think that's a little different. If he goes there and performs poorly, people aren't going to look at it like they do a quarterback because quarterback's the most important position in all sports. So there's a fine line between the position arrangement, but I think Marrone would be really sticking his neck out there if they take Nassib in the first round.
Good deal. Well, thank you, Matt, very much for joining us, and we hope to have you back next year for the 2014 edition. In the meantime, I'm just going to look forward to kicking your butt when fantasy football season comes around.
I look forward to it. I'm also looking forward to my rankings and putting Tavon Austin in my top 10 somewhere.
Well, there you have it. Now, Greg, before we let you go, thank you for joining us, and please let us know, what do you think is going to be the big storyline here of the first round of the draft and the draft as a whole?
Wow. I think the big storyline would be Miami trading up and throwing everything that we just said out the window.
Trading up to get what? To get who?
You know, if Miami trades up, they can go after somebody like a Lane Johnson or an Eric Fisher, which would really throw things off. Although I see Eric Fisher going to Detroit. Somebody like Lane Johnson would probably end up, if Miami makes a trade to Philadelphia.
Yes, you're right there, Greg. They could trade up and everything is messed up here, but that's the thing. I could see a dozen trades happening just in the first round alone, and it's just the way it's going to be this year because there are going to be specific players that specific teams want, and some will be willing to trade up. A lot will be looking to trade down because there aren't that big name player out there to trade for as well. So there's lots of possibilities happening.
Yeah, here's another thing too. Miami could go after somebody like Luke Jokel, for instance. You might see a trade with Kansas City at this particular area, since Kansas City's needs are not as defined as, let's say, most number 1 teams are out there.
Geno Smith, I think we're going to be talking a lot about how he was so, I don't want to say overblown, but he was supposed to go in a lot of mock drafts as high as number 4 to the Eagles. And it's kind of a shame because he is a good quarterback, but he's not as polished as some scouts are making him out to be. I know he had a great pro day at West Virginia. I think he completed all but 2 of his passes or something like that. But me being a Pitt fan, and he's torched my team, for the better part of 4 years, it's still a shame because I do think he can be a help to the team. I think he'd be a great fit with the Eagles. But this could be one of those scenarios where he could drop really, really far. And don't be surprised. I am telling you, don't be surprised if the Steelers take a look at him if he drops in later rounds. I know the Steelers are looking at Bray for a possible quarterback in, I think, the 3rd or 4th round. But if Geno Smith somehow could slip, I could possibly see the Steelers maybe snagging him up. So where Geno Smith lands is going to, in my opinion, going to be the biggest storyline because whoever lands him is going to have a very good quarterback on their team.
And that's a very interesting comment all around because we've seen drafts. Our good friend Mr. Henderson has said that if you were allowed to do trades in his mock draft, you would have 4 quarterbacks going in the first round, whereas I can easily see 0 quarterbacks going in the first round. Lots of parity. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's what's going to make Thursday night quite exciting in my book. On that note, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, fans, for tuning in and for seeing what your team is going to do. Thank you to Dan Massaro from the Calf Muscle. Thank you to Matt Henderson for joining us. And, of course, thank you to the Saint, Alex Dellaverson, and the mad scientist himself, Greg Beshero. For 3SN, I'm James Dotson. Have a good night, everybody.